He waved the knife from his lower right side upwards across his body towards my left shoulder.
The badge is supposed to protect. It is meant to represent safety, justice, and the thin blue line between order and chaos. But sometimes that line bends, and sometimes it breaks. When power corrupts, the law itself can become a weapon. The stories you're about to hear are not about mistakes. They are about choices. Choices made by the men and women who wore the badge and used it to destroy lives instead of saving them. Across continents and decades, from frozen Siberia to the streets of London, from Chicago to Jakarta, these officers traded their oaths for obsession, greed, and blood. They remind us that evil does not always come dressed as a criminal. Sometimes it wears the uniform of authority, and sometimes it knocks on your door, smiling. Mikhail Popkov, Angarsk, Russia, 1992. The badge is supposed to protect. It represents trust, duty, and safety. But sometimes the badge becomes a mask, and behind it waits something colder than crime itself. In the frozen industrial city of Angarsk, deep inside Siberia, one man used his uniform to hunt. His name was Mikhail Popkov, a respected police officer, husband, and father. To the people who knew him, he was reliable and polite. To the women who crossed his path at night, he was a death sentence. It began in the early 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union. The world around Popkov was falling apart. Crime was high, resources were low, and the police were stretched to their limits. He appeared to be one of the few men still trying to keep order, but beneath that calm surface, something dark was growing. Popkov would patrol late at night, driving his police car through empty streets. When he saw a woman walking alone, he would stop and offer a ride home. His uniform and badge made him look safe. He smiled. He spoke softly. And when she stepped into his car, she believed she was being rescued. She was not. He would drive her out of the city and into the forests that surrounded Angarsk, where the snow swallowed sound and distance. There, in the stillness, he became something else entirely. He raped them. He killed them. And when it was over, he left their bodies in the cold, covered in frost and silence. By morning, he was back at work. He answered calls. He joined investigations. He even helped search for the same women he had murdered. He attended funerals. He stood beside grieving families and offered condolences. He was their protector, their neighbor, and their nightmare. For years, the city whispered about a serial killer. Dozens of women were found in the same condition, showing signs of extreme violence. The police called him the Angarsk Maniac, but no one suspected one of their own. Why would they? Popkov was the perfect officer. He volunteered for extra shifts. He stayed late. He was always willing to help. He later claimed he killed women he believed were immoral, women he thought were unfaithful or drunk. He said he was cleansing the streets. He said it. Gave him peace. But what he was really doing was playing God. By the early 2000s, the number of victims had grown beyond 30. And then, suddenly, the killings stopped. Popkov retired quietly, moved on with his life, and faded into obscurity. The police had no leads. The case went cold. 2 years became 10. Families never stopped asking for answers, but the killer had disappeared. Then, in 2012, technology caught up to him. Investigators launched a large-scale DNA operation, collecting samples from thousands of former officers. A partial match appeared in the system. The sample belonged to Popkov's daughter. Through her, they found him. When they came to his door, he did not resist. He smiled as if he had been waiting. He confessed calmly, explaining the murders in chilling detail. He admitted to 22 killings, then 25, then 40. By the time it was over, he was linked to 89 confirmed murders, though investigators believe there were even more. During his trial, Popkov sat with his hands folded, polite and quiet. He described his victims without emotion. He said he felt calm after each killing, as if something inside him had been restored. The court found him guilty. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2018. He now lives out his days in a Siberian prison called the Black Dolphin, one of the most secure and brutal prisons in Russia. He spends 23 hours a day in his cell. He eats through a slot in the door. He has no contact with other inmates. He will never leave. Mikhail Popkov is not insane. He is deliberate, intelligent, and logical. He knew exactly what he was doing. He used his authority not to protect, but to hunt. And that makes his story one of the most terrifying of all. In interviews, he has said that he does not regret his actions. He said that every society needs people like him to remove what he called the weak. His words chilled even the investigators who questioned him. The forests around Angarsk still carry the memory of his crimes. Locals avoid certain paths, certain roads, because they say the ground there remembers. The families of his victims still live with the sound of police sirens that no longer mean safety. They mean loss. Popkov's story is not just about murder. It is about betrayal. It is about how power, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes the perfect disguise. The uniform gave him authority. The badge gave him permission. And that combination allowed him to kill for almost 20 years. He was not an outsider breaking the system. He was the system. And for the women of Angarsk, the flashing lights of a patrol car were not a sign of help. They were a sign of death. But while Russia buried its horror beneath the snow, in a quiet Dutch neighborhood, another man in uniform would betray that same sacred trust. His crime would not stretch decades. It would happen in a single night, behind a garden fence, just a few doors away from Trur, home, Sander Vreeswijk, Dordrecht, Netherlands, 2010. Sometimes the monster is not a stranger. Sometimes it lives across the street, smiles when you pass, and waves to your children on their way to school. In early March of 2010, the Netherlands watched a nightmare unfold in real time. It began with a missing child alert, the kind that spreads quickly across television screens and radio stations. Her name was Millie Bol, 11 years old, bright, kind, full of life. She lived in the quiet city of Dordrecht, a place where people still trusted their neighbors. On the evening of March 10th, Millie called her parents at 5:30. She said she was home, that everything was fine. Minutes later, she was gone. The police responded fast. Search teams combed the streets. Helicopters flew over the neighborhoods. Volunteers gathered at local schools, forming groups to look for the missing girl. Her face appeared everywhere, smiling from posters and news broadcasts. But while her family and neighbors searched in desperation, the man responsible joined the search himself. His name was Sander Vreeswijk, 34 years old, a police officer who lived just a few doors away. He was well-liked, always calm, always polite. He had spent more than a decade in uniform, serving his community, building trust. When Millie disappeared, he was one of the first to offer help. No one suspected him. Why would they? He was a police officer. He was one of them. Days passed. Then, on March 17th, investigators traced Millie's last phone call. It had been made to a number on her street. The call ended abruptly, but it was enough to narrow the search. The number belonged to Officer Vreeswijk. Detectives went to his home. He greeted them calmly, invited them inside, and offered them coffee. The smell of bleach filled the air. When questioned, he stuttered, then fell silent. Within hours, he confessed. He told them Millie had come to his house voluntarily after he texted her, pretending to have something to show her. She trusted him because he was a familiar face, someone who wore the uniform of safety. Once inside, he strangled her. Then he buried her body in his backyard, beneath a small wooden shed. That night, police surrounded the house and began digging. They found Millie's body exactly where he said it would be. The news broke before dawn. An entire nation woke up to the unthinkable truth. The man sworn to protect their children had murdered one, and he had done it in his own neighborhood, within sight of her home. During questioning, Sander offered no clear motive. He said it was sudden, that he snapped. He spoke of loneliness, of emotional stress, but his words sounded hollow. He had no history of violence, no criminal record, no warning signs. Only a mask that had hidden the rot beneath. At his trial, prosecutors described the murder as cold and calculated. They showed how he lured her, killed her, and then pretended to help find her. They spoke of how he comforted Millie's parents during the search, even hugging them while her body lay buried in his garden. The courtroom wept. Some police officers turned their faces away. The judges sentenced him to 20 years in prison and ordered psychiatric treatment. It was one of the heaviest sentences ever given in the Netherlands for a crime of this nature, but to the public, no punishment could ever balance what he had done. Because Sander's betrayal was larger than one murder, he had taken something from the entire country. the belief that the uniform could be trusted. The house where Millie died was torn down. The ground where she was found became a memorial, covered in flowers and drawings. Every year, people gather there to light candles and whisper her name. Her parents have said they want her remembered not for how she died, but for how she lived, full of laughter, full of kindness. In prison, Sander Vreeswijk rarely speaks. He has refused interviews. He spends his days isolated, ignored even by other inmates. To them, he is worse than a murderer. He is a traitor to the very oath that defines their world. The story of Millie Bol remains one of the darkest chapters in Dutch history. It forced the police to look inward, to admit that evil can exist even among their own ranks. It changed how officers are screened, how trust is earned, and how quickly that trust can die. For the people of Dordrecht, it was more than a tragedy. It was a warning that the symbols of safety can lie, that behind a smile and a badge can hide the most dangerous kind of predator, one who already knows exactly how to hide. The street where it happened looks normal now. Children play there again. But for those who remember, the silence after sunset still feels heavier than it should. The laughter fades faster. The lights stay on a little longer. Because once a neighborhood learns that the danger lived among them, peace never truly returns. And while the Netherlands struggled with the horror of a single murder, 4 years later on the streets of Chicago, a different kind of killing would unfold. This time, there would be no mystery. The whole world would see exactly what happened, frame by frame.
Overruled, I'll allow your white latitude on cross-examination.
No, and I'm very proud of that.
Jason Van Dyke, Chicago, United States, 2014. There are murders that hide behind secrets, and there are murders that unfold in full view of the world, caught by a machine that never blinks. On the night of October 20th, 2014, Chicago police officers were called to a report of a suspect carrying a knife near Pulaski Road. It was the kind of call that happens every night in the city. Routine, forgettable. But that night, a 17-year-old boy named Laquan McDonald would walk into history. Laquan was thin, quiet, and alone. He was holding a small folding knife, walking down the middle of the street. He was not attacking anyone. He was not running. He was surrounded by police cars, their lights flashing red and blue against the wet asphalt. Then one officer arrived who would change everything. His name was Jason Van Dyke, a 13-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department. He was 36 years old, married, and known for his temper. He stepped out of his patrol car, pulled his gun, and fired 16 times. The first bullet hit Laquan and spun him to the ground. The next 15 came as he lay there, motionless, bleeding into the street. Each shot echoed across the city, bouncing off buildings and disappearing into the night. In less than 15 seconds, Laquan McDonald was dead. In the official report, the story sounded familiar. The officer said he feared for his life. He said the suspect lunged at him with the knife. He said he had no choice. For more than a year, that story held. The city stood by it. The department protected it. But the truth was sitting quietly inside a dashboard camera, waiting to be seen. When a judge ordered the release of that video in November 2015, the city erupted. The footage showed Laquan walking away from the officers, not toward them. He posed no threat, and yet Van Dyke opened fire, his body calm, his aim steady, his face blank. The video showed the boy fall, twitch, and go still, while the officer kept shooting. 16 times. The image spread across the world. People filled the streets in protest, holding signs that said 16 shots and a cover-up. They shouted Laquan's name into the cold night air. The mayor apologized publicly. The police superintendent was fired. And Jason Van Dyke was charged with second-degree murder and 16 counts of aggravated battery, one for every bullet he fired. During the trial, prosecutors played the video over and over. Frame by frame, they showed the distance between the two men. They showed how Laquan was moving away, not forward. They showed how Van Dyke fired again even after the boy was already down. The defense argued fear, saying the officer believed his life was in danger. But the evidence spoke louder. The dash cam did not lie. The verdict came on October 5th, 2018. Guilty. Jason Van Dyke became the first Chicago police officer in almost 50 years to be convicted of murder for an on-duty shooting. He was sentenced to 6 years and 9 months in prison. He served a little more than 3. When he walked out of prison in 2022, the streets were quiet, but the anger remained. For many, his early release was another betrayal, another reminder that justice is rarely equal. For the family of Laquan McDonald, the sentence ended long before their grief did. The video of that night changed more than one man's life. It changed the way an entire city saw its police. Body cameras became mandatory, policies were rewritten, training was overhauled. But the real change was deeper than that. It was in the way people looked at flashing blue lights after dark, wondering if protection was still what they meant. Laquan's story became a symbol. He was 17 years old, a child of Chicago, and his death forced the world to see the truth that had been ignored for too long. That sometimes the badge does not protect. Sometimes it hides the violence it was meant to stop. For Jason Van Dyke, the years that followed were spent in silence. He gave no interviews. He showed no emotion. He lives now as a man stripped of his power, haunted by the seconds that defined his life. The street where Laquan fell has no memorial, no plaque. Cars drive over it every day. The city moves on, pretending the blood has faded. But for those who watch the video, it never will. Because the truth caught on camera cannot be erased, no matter how much time passes. Laquan McDonald's name still echoes in protests across the world. His story became the first domino in a chain that would reach far beyond Chicago. Because 6 years later, another black man would die beneath the weight of another officer, and this time, the whole world would see it. And while Chicago's wound was still open, another killing captured by a camera would ignite the largest protest movement of the modern era. A man begging for air, a knee pressed against his neck, and a crowd that could not look away. Derek Chauvin, the knee that stopped the world. Minneapolis, United States, 2020.
Face away.
Okay, please don't shoot me. Please, man.
I'm not going to shoot you. Step out and face away.
I'm going to get out, man. Please don't shoot me, man.
Some crimes happen in shadows, hidden from view. This one unfolded beneath the sky, in daylight, surrounded by witnesses who could do nothing but record. On May 25, 2020, police officers in Minneapolis responded to a call about a counterfeit $20 bill at a corner store called Cup Foods. It was the kind of minor incident that should have ended with a warning, a ticket, or nothing at all. Instead, it became a moment that the world would never forget. Among the officers who arrived was Derek Chauvin, 44 years old, a 19-year veteran of the Minneapolis Police Department. He had trained recruits, mentored younger officers, and earned commendations for bravery, but behind that uniform was a man who had long been accused of excessive force, a man whose anger often outweighed his restraint. The suspect that day was George Floyd, 46 years old, a father, a friend, and a man who had once worked as a security guard. He was tall, soft-spoken, unarmed. When the officers arrived, they pulled him from his car, handcuffed him, and pushed him face down onto the street. He begged them to stop. He said he could not breathe. They did not listen. For 9 minutes and 29 seconds, Derek Chauvin pressed his knee into George Floyd's neck. 9 minutes while people shouted for him to stop. 9 minutes while George gasped for air. 9 minutes while a crowd of strangers watched a man die in front of them. A teenage girl recorded it all on her phone. Her hands were shaking. Her voice trembled as she pleaded with the officers. But Chauvin did not move. His hand rested in his pocket. His face was calm. There was no struggle, no chaos, just quiet cruelty. When paramedics arrived, George Floyd was unresponsive. His last words were the ones that would echo across the world. "I can't breathe." Within hours, the video spread online. Millions saw it, then billions. It crossed every border, every language, every screen. And the world changed. Cities erupted in protest. From New York to London, from Berlin to Nairobi, people marched carrying signs that said "Justice for George Floyd" and "I can't breathe." Statues fell. Governments promised reform. Even those who had never cared about American policing before could not look away. Because it was not just one man's death they were watching. It was a system exposed. 4 days after the killing, Derek Chauvin was arrested. He was charged with second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. He was placed in solitary confinement for his own safety. His face, once hidden behind the authority of a badge, became a symbol of everything that was broken. The trial began in March 2021 and was broadcast live to the world. Prosecutors played the video again and again. Every scream, every plea, every second of silence. One witness, a firefighter, said she begged to help but was refused. Another, a child, said she still heard George Floyd's voice when she tried to sleep. The defense argued that Chauvin followed his training, that George Floyd's health and drug use caused his death. But the world had already made up its mind, because no rulebook, no police manual could ever justify 9 minutes of suffocation. When the verdict came on April 20th, 2021, the city stopped breathing for one final moment. Then, the word came: guilty, on all counts. Tears filled the streets, people hugged strangers, car horns echoed in celebration. And for the first time in years, many believed justice had been seen. Derek Chauvin was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison, later extended after federal charges. He will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. But the mark he left on the world is not measured in years. It is measured in the millions of voices his actions awakened. George Floyd became more than a victim. He became a movement. His death forced people to confront the truth about power, race, and accountability. It made every officer with a badge aware that the world is always watching. And it showed that silence, when combined with authority, can be the most dangerous weapon of all. Today, Derek Chauvin sits in a cell, alone, far from the chaos he created. He has spoken little since his conviction. He remains unrepentant, distant, and quiet. But no amount of silence will erase the image of his knee, his stillness, his indifference. Because when the law becomes the killer, there is no safety left to believe in. The video of George Floyd's death did not just capture one murder. It captured a moment in history when the mask of authority cracked open for the entire world to see. It showed that sometimes the greatest danger is not the criminal on the street, but the one wearing the uniform beside you. And while the world mourned the man who could not breathe, another video from across the ocean would soon expose a different kind of brutality. A street in the Philippines, a mother, her son, and an officer whose rage was caught on camera. Jonel Nuezca, Paniki, Philippines 2020. Some killings are hidden in shadow. Others happen in the open, beneath the sun, with witnesses standing close enough to count the seconds. This one was caught by a phone, filmed by a child, and shared with the world before the echo of the gunfire had even faded. On December 20th, 2020, in a quiet neighborhood in the town of Paniki, a small argument turned into an execution. It was late in the afternoon. The air was heavy with the sound of firecrackers. Two families stood facing each other, shouting across a short patch of dirt and grass. At first, it looked like an ordinary dispute between neighbors, but among them stood a man in plain clothes, his anger sharp and dangerous. His name was Jonel Nuezca, 46 years old, a veteran of the Philippine National Police. He had served for more than 20 years, a husband, a father, and, to those who knew him, a man with a short fuse. He had faced disciplinary cases before, accusations of misconduct and violence, but always returned to duty with his badge untouched. That day, he was off duty, arguing with his neighbors, the Gregorio family, over noise, land, and pride. Across from him stood Sonia Gregorio, 52 years old, holding the arm of her son Frank Anthony, 25. They had argued with Nuezca before, but this time, the fight would end differently. Jonel's teenage daughter stood beside him, filming the scene on her phone. Her father was angry, shouting for the Gregorios to stop recording him. His daughter's voice could be heard saying, "My father is a policeman." And in that instant, it was no longer an argument. It was a warning. Sonia tried to calm things down. She smiled nervously, still holding her son. She told Nuezca to go home, to forget it. But he did not. He pulled his gun from his side and raised it. 2 shots rang out. One hit Sonia in the head. One hit her son. Both fell instantly. The phone never stopped recording. The camera never shook. In the final second, Jonel looked straight ahead, his face calm, his voice low, as if he had done nothing at all. Then he turned and walked away. The video spread across social media within minutes. By nightfall, it was everywhere. Millions watched as a mother and son were executed in their own front yard by the man who was supposed to protect them. The Philippines, already weary of police brutality, erupted in shock and fury. The next morning, Jonel Nuezca surrendered at the police station. He confessed immediately. He said he was sorry, But no apology could erase what the world had seen. In the eyes of the public, he had become the embodiment of everything wrong with the system that had protected him for years. Investigators discovered that Nuezca had faced multiple administrative complaints during his career, including 2 for murder. Each time, the cases were dismissed for lack of evidence. Each time, he returned to the streets. Until one afternoon, under a sky too bright for horror, his temper finally ended 2 innocent lives. The trial was short. There was no mystery, no doubt. The video was evidence enough. In August of 2021, Jonel Nuezca was found guilty of 2 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. He showed no emotion as the verdict was read. Inside prison, he kept to himself. He refused interviews. He avoided other inmates. Then, less than a year later, in November of 2022, guards found him unresponsive in his cell. He was declared dead from natural causes. He was 47. The man who killed in front of the world died alone, unseen, and unloved. The spot where Sonia and Frank Anthony fell became a shrine. Neighbors left flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Some said prayers. Others stood in silence. The family turned the wall where the murders happened into a small memorial covered in messages that read, "Justice for the Gregorios." The case left scars on the country's conscience because it proved what so many already feared, that power without restraint always ends in tragedy. The uniform that once represented safety now carried the memory of 2 bodies lying in the dirt, and the phone that filmed it all became a weapon stronger than any bullet. The image of Jonel Nuezca's daughter still lingers, her small voice in the background saying, "My father is a policeman." She will carry that sentence for the rest of her life. She did not know it then, but in that moment, she captured not just a crime, but the death of trust. The Philippines continues to struggle with its identity, caught between the need for security and the demand for justice. And though Jonel Nuezca is gone, his actions remain, replayed again and again, a warning carved into memory. Because what the world saw that day was not just murder. It was power revealed in its rawest form, authority turned into arrogance, duty twisted into dominance. No court sentence can undo that. No apology can erase it. Once the uniform becomes a shield for cruelty, every light on every patrol car begins to look a little dimmer. And while the Philippines grieve 2 lives lost in daylight across the ocean, another video from the streets of Bogotá would show that even without bullets, the cruelty of power can still kill. A man crying for mercy, sparks flashing in the night, and a scream that would ignite a nation. Harba Damian Rodriguez Diaz, Bogotá, Colombia, 2020. Some killings happen in anger, others happen in habit. This one began with electricity. The hum of power turned against a man who begged for mercy. It was late on the night of September 8th, 2020, in Bogotá. The air was warm, heavy with noise. A taxi driver named Javier Ordóñez stood with friends outside an apartment complex. He was 38 years old, a father of 2, and a law student hoping for a better life. He had been drinking that night, laughing with friends, when a police patrol stopped beside him. What happened next would ignite an entire nation. The officers were Harby Damian Rodriguez Diaz and Juan Camilo Lloreda, both from the Bogotá Metropolitan Police. They accused Javier of breaking the pandemic curfew. He tried to talk to them, to calm things down. But their patience was already gone. They pushed him to the ground, pinned him, and drew a taser. The first shock made him scream. The next made him beg. Over and over, they pressed the device against his skin while his body convulsed on the pavement. A witness recorded it on her phone from a balcony above. In the shaky footage, Javier's voice is clear. He says, "Please, no more." The officers do not stop. They keep shocking him again and again, the electric crackle mixing with his cries. The crowd watching from windows yells for them to stop. Someone shouts that he is not resisting. Someone else cries. But on the ground, the officers remain calm, their faces expressionless. When they finally lift him up, Javier is limp. They drag him into a patrol car, still handcuffed, and drive away. He never makes it home. By the time he arrives at the hospital, he is dead. Doctors count 8 burns from the taser on his chest and arms, deep bruises on his ribs, and a swollen face. They try to revive him, but his body is already still. Outside, the video is spreading across social media faster than the authorities can react. By morning, the city is burning. Thousands pour into the streets, shouting Javier's name. They hold signs that read "Justice for Javier" or "Doñez." They chant "Stop the violence." The protests grow into riots. Police stations are set on fire. Gunfire rings out. By the end of the night, more than 10 people are dead, and hundreds are injured. The government promises an investigation, but the people have heard that before. In Colombia, police brutality is not new. It is part of a long, silent story that few dared to challenge, until now. Within days, both officers are suspended and charged. The evidence is overwhelming. The video, the witnesses, the medical report, all tell the same story. Torture, murder, abuse of power. During the trial, the courtroom fills with the sound of Javier's last words played from the recording. "Please, no more." The judge listens in silence. When the video ends, even the officers lower their heads. Prosecutors call it one of the most brutal acts of police violence in Colombia's history. The defense says it was an accident, that the officers never meant to kill him. But intention cannot erase pain, and cameras cannot lie. In May of 2023, both Harvey and Juan are found guilty of torture and aggravated homicide. They are sentenced to 40 years in prison, one of the harshest punishments ever given to police officers in Colombia. The judge tells them, "You did not enforce the law. You became the crime itself." Outside the courthouse, Javier's family stands together. His mother holds a photo of him smiling, wearing his old police academy uniform from years before. She says, "He believed justice existed. Maybe now, somewhere, it does." For Colombia, the case becomes a turning point. It forces the country to confront the violence within its own protectors. It shows that authority without humanity is no different from tyranny, and it proves that sometimes a single video can change a nation more than 1,000 speeches ever could. Harvey and Juan served their time in isolation. No interviews, no statements. Their names are now known not as officers, but as symbols of a cruelty that can no longer hide behind the badge. But for Javier's family, there is no peace. Every spark, every sudden noise at night, still brings the memory of that sound. The click of a taser, the smell of burnt air, and the voice of a man begging for life. Javier's last words became a national symbol, painted on walls, whispered in protests, and printed on shirts. "Please, no more." 3 words that broke a wall of silence. 3 words that forced a country to look at itself. The streets of Bogotá eventually quieted. But the silence is not peace. It is memory. It is a warning. Because as long as power remains unchecked, another voice will someday cry those same words again. And someone else will record them. And while Colombia struggled with the aftermath of its own reckoning, across the ocean in London, another uniform would commit a crime just as unthinkable. Only this time, it would begin with a false arrest, a pair of handcuffs, and a police badge used to kidnap an innocent woman. Wayne Couzens, London, England, 2021.
I know that she went missing up in London somewhere.
There are crimes that destroy lives, and there are crimes that destroy faith itself. When a protector becomes a predator, every promise of safety dies with him. On the night of March 3rd, 2021, Sarah Everard, a 33-year-old marketing executive, left a friend's home in Clapham, South London. It was 9 o'clock at night. She spoke with her boyfriend on the phone, laughed softly, and said she would be home soon. She never arrived. Her walk should have taken less than 30 minutes, but halfway there, a white car stopped beside her. The man who stepped out looked official. He carried something small and metallic, a badge. To Sarah, that badge meant safety. To him, it meant control. His name was Wayne Couzens, a 48-year-old officer with the Metropolitan Police. He was married, a father of 2, and part of an armed unit assigned to protect government officials. He knew how to command authority. He knew how to make people obey. That night, London was under strict lockdown because of the pandemic. Couzens used it as a weapon. He told Sarah she had broken COVID restrictions. He showed his warrant card, handcuffed her, and told her she was under arrest. Witnesses saw the encounter, and thought nothing was wrong. They saw a man in authority doing his job. They did not know they were watching a kidnapping. Couzens drove her out of the city through the quiet roads of Kent. The cameras on street corners tracked his car as it disappeared into the dark. What happened next came only from the evidence he left behind. Sarah was raped, murdered, and burned. Her remains were found a week later in a wooded area near Ashford. She had been strangled with a police belt. The discovery shocked the nation. The idea that a serving police officer could commit such a crime felt impossible, but as investigators dug deeper, the truth grew darker. Couzens had planned it. Days before the abduction, he rented a car, bought handcuffs, and scouted the area. He used his police badge to make his plan look official. He used his training to make it work. When police came to arrest him, he lied easily. He said he had been visiting a friend. He said he did not know Sarah, but the evidence was everywhere. CCTV, DNA, receipts. His lies crumbled within hours. During his trial, the courtroom fell silent as prosecutors described how he had used the law itself as his disguise. They said he had exploited a moment of national fear, a time when people trusted the police more than ever, and turned that trust into a weapon. The judge called it a crime of exceptional brutality. The press called him a monster in uniform. The public called him something worse. On September 30th, 2021, Wayne Couzens was sentenced to life imprisonment with no chance of release. It is one of the rarest sentences in British history. He will die in prison. But Sarah Everard's death became more than one tragedy. It became a movement. In the days after her body was found, thousands of women across the country spoke out about their own fear. The fear of walking home, the fear of being followed, the fear that even those sworn to protect them might be the danger. Candlelight vigils filled city squares, flowers covered the streets, and in the crowd, tears turned to anger. At one vigil in Clapham Common, police officers broke up the gathering, citing COVID restrictions. Photos of women being dragged away by other officers ignited new outrage. The irony was unbearable. They came to mourn a woman killed by a policeman, only to be silenced by more police. The Metropolitan Police issued apologies, investigations, and promises of reform, but none of it was enough. For many, the uniform no longer symbolized safety. It symbolized silence. Wayne Couzens now spends 23 hours a day in isolation inside a high-security prison. No visitors, no interviews. He is known as a target even among other inmates. The man who once carried a gun to protect the public now eats alone under constant watch. The street where Sarah disappeared looks ordinary again. People walk there every night. But her name remains carved into the nation's memory, whispered whenever a woman glances over her shoulder on an empty street. Because her story is not just about what one man did, it is about the fear that still lives in the space he left behind. Sarah's death forced Britain to ask an impossible question. If we cannot trust the badge, who can we trust at all? The truth is simple and cruel. Evil does not need to hide from authority when it can wear it, and while Britain mourned the loss of a woman taken by the power she trusted most, another story unfolded thousands of miles away in Thailand. There, cameras would capture police officers turning interrogation into execution, and one man would become known not for his rank, but for his obsession with wealth and cars. Thitisan Joe Ferrari, Uthanafon, Nakhon Sawan, Thailand, 2021. Some men wear the badge for honor, others wear it for power, but a few wear it for something far simpler: greed. In the sweltering heart of Thailand, in a province called Nakhon Sawan, one officer lived like a king among commoners. His name was Thitisan Uthanafon, though everyone called him Joe Ferrari. The nickname came from his obsession with luxury cars. He owned more than 20 vehicles, imported illegally and stored in private garages. He wore designer watches, tailored suits, and carried himself like royalty. He was rich, admired, and feared. As a high-ranking police colonel, Joe Ferrari's word carried weight. He commanded the provincial station with absolute authority. Officers saluted him like a god. But beneath the shine of his badges and his imported Italian cars lay a rot that no polish could hide. On August 5th, 2021, a young drug suspect named Jerapong Thanapat was brought into the station for questioning. He was 24 years old, quiet, nervous, and alone. What should have been a routine interrogation turned into a filmed execution. Security cameras inside the room captured every second. Thitisan demanded money. 2 million baht for the suspect's release. Jerapong refused. So, Thidison ordered his officers to teach him a lesson. They placed a plastic bag over his head. He struggled. They added another bag, and then another, layer upon layer, until his movement slowed, then stopped. For more than 6 minutes, the officers watched as Jerapong gasped and kicked, his hands tied, his voice muffled. Then silence. When the bag was finally removed, he was dead. They wiped his face, rearranged his clothes, and called it an accident. The next day, they told his family he had overdosed. It might have worked, if not for one small mistake. A camera in the corner of the room kept recording. The footage, leaked days later, first among local officers, then online. Within hours, the world had seen it. The images were impossible to deny. 7 police officers surrounding a man as their leader calmly suffocated him to death. The outrage was immediate. Protests filled the streets. News anchors could not hide their shock as they replayed the moment frame by frame. Thidison vanished. Rumors spread that he had fled to Myanmar or that he was protected by powerful friends in Bangkok. For a time, it seemed he might escape justice just like so many before him. But the camera had already convicted him in the court of public opinion. The images were burned into memory. And soon, the real courts followed. On August 26th, Thidison surrendered. He held a press conference from a police station more than 500 kilometers away, where he appeared calm, confident, and smiling. He claimed the death was an accident. He said he had no intention to kill. He said he only wanted to scare the suspect. The country listened in disbelief. He wore no uniform that day, just a plain white shirt. But everyone still saw the badge in his arrogance. Investigators uncovered more than luxury cars. They found evidence of corruption, illegal asset seizures, and extortion that stretched back years. He had been living like a criminal while enforcing the law. His colleagues admitted that his wealth came not from salary, but from confiscated goods he sold for personal profit. He was the kind of officer who could buy silence with fear. The trial began in 2022 and was broadcast across the nation. The courtroom was silent as the video played. The victim's family wept quietly. The judge watched without emotion. When the screen went black, the evidence spoke louder than any testimony ever could. The verdict was guilty. Thidisajo Ferrari was sentenced to death, later reduced to life imprisonment. 6 other officers received lesser sentences. In his final statement, Thidison bowed slightly and said he accepted the judgment, but his tone was still calm, still proud. Even stripped of his rank, he spoke like a man who believed he would always be untouchable. In prison, Joe Ferrari lives far from the world he once ruled. His designer suits have been replaced by gray uniforms. His cars sit abandoned in impound lots, collecting dust. The man who once smiled beside Ferraris now stares at concrete walls. But for those who saw the video, his image will never fade, because it showed something few ever witnessed so clearly: the exact moment when authority becomes murder. The case sent shockwaves through Thailand. It forced the police to promise reforms, though few believed change would last. Corruption runs deep, and memory fades fast. But for once, the camera won. For once, justice caught up with power. Joe Ferrari will spend the rest of his life behind bars. And every time he closes his eyes, he will see what the world saw: a man with everything choking, the life out of someone with nothing. Because when greed becomes stronger than duty, the law itself becomes a weapon. And no badge, no title, and no fortune can protect a man from the truth recorded by his own walls. And while Thailand faced the shame of a killer in command, far away in South Africa, another former officer would be exposed for something even colder. Her crimes were not sudden bursts of rage, but patient calculations of greed, each death carefully planned, each one insured for profit. Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu, Johannesburg, South Africa, 2021. Some people kill in rage, some kill in fear, and some kill for nothing more than money. This is the story of a woman who turned death into a business. In the suburbs of Johannesburg, Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu was a respected police officer. She worked for the South African Police Service for more than 16 years. She smiled often. She was known for her discipline and confidence. To her colleagues, she seemed ordinary. To her victims, she was family. Her crimes began quietly, a policy here, a signature there. She took out life insurance on relatives, her boyfriend, her sister, her niece, even her own mother. Each policy listed her as the sole beneficiary, and one by one, the people close to her began to die. The first was her cousin, witness Mudau, found murdered in 2012. Then her sister Audrey, beaten to death 2 years later. Then her boyfriend, Maurice Mabasa, stabbed more than 80 times in 2015. Each time, she cried convincingly, gave interviews, attended funerals, and collected the insurance payouts. In total, she claimed more than 1.4 million rand from the deaths of her loved ones. To the outside world, it looked like terrible luck. To investigators, it began to look like a pattern. In 2018, Ndlovu tried to continue her game, targeting her elderly mother and 5 nieces and nephews. She arranged to have them murdered in their home in Bushbuck Ridge. She even bought train tickets for the hitman, but the man she hired was not what she expected. He was an undercover police officer. When the moment came, hidden cameras captured her giving instructions. She described the layout of the house, where each child slept, and how the killers should make it look like a robbery. She spoke softly, as if planning a routine operation. Then she handed over the money for the job. It was enough to pay for her own arrest. Within hours, police swarmed her house. She was taken into custody still wearing her uniform. At first, she denied everything. She smiled for the cameras, confident, composed. But when investigators played the recording of her conversation, the smile faded. She knew it was over. The trial became one of the most watched in South African history. People gathered outside the courtroom every day, holding signs that said justice for the victims. Inside, Ndlovu sat calmly, her hair neatly braided, her posture straight. She often laughed, joked, and blew kisses to photographers. Even when confronted with photographs of the people she had killed, she showed no remorse. Prosecutors described her as a predator who saw human lives as transactions. They listed 6 confirmed victims, though investigators believe the real number could be higher. They said she had killed her own family for profit and would have killed again if she had not been caught. When the judge read the verdict on October 29, 2021, the courtroom fell silent, guilty on all counts: murder, conspiracy, fraud. She was sentenced to 6 life terms plus additional years for attempted murder. Her reaction was simple. She smiled. Then she turned to the camera and waved. In prison, Ndlovu remains emotionless. She has been described by staff as calm, polite, and distant. She spends her days reading newspapers, still claiming innocence despite the evidence. Her cell is small and bare, a far cry from the home she once decorated with the money of the dead. The people she killed can no longer speak, but their stories are told in every headline that carries her name. Their photos hang in the courthouse where she was convicted. Their faces remind everyone who sees them that evil does not always look angry. Sometimes it looks professional. Sometimes it smiles for the camera. Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu remains one of South Africa's most notorious murderers. Her story forced the country to examine the dark intersection between greed and authority. How power can be used not only to harm strangers, but to destroy those closest to us. Her case also revealed how easily trust can be weaponized. She was the one called for help when others were in danger. She was the one people looked to for justice. And she turned that faith into her cover. Even behind bars, her legend lingers. For every officer who heard her name, there is a lesson. That a badge without conscience is nothing more than a license for chaos. And for every family that buried one of her victims, there is only grief and a question that will never have an answer. How could anyone kill so many times and still sleep at night? Nomia once said she was not a monster, just misunderstood. But monsters do not need to believe in evil to become it. They only need to act without feeling. Her name will never fade from South African history, because she proved something that should never have to be proven again, that the most dangerous killers are often those who already wear the uniform of trust. And while South Africa tried to make sense of a woman who turned murder into a career, another officer half a world away would stain his own nation's badge with blood. A man of rank, power, and reputation, whose decision to kill his own subordinate would expose an entire web of lies within Indonesia's police elite. Ferdy Sambo, Jakarta, Indonesia 2022.
Oleh karena itu, kemudian tersangka FS memanggil tersangka RR dan tersangka RE untuk melakukan
Power can hide many things: corruption, cruelty, and even murder. But when a man at the top of the system commits the crime himself, the entire system begins to crack. In July of 2022, Indonesia was shaken by the scandal that would expose the dark underbelly of its police elite. It began not with a body in the street, but with a body inside the home of one of the nation's most powerful officers. His name was Ferdy Sambo, a two-star general, respected, feared, and untouchable. He commanded the Internal Affairs Division, the very department tasked with policing the police. He was, quite literally, the law's law. On July 8th, a gunshot echoed from his official residence in South Jakarta. Moments later, officers reported that an aide had been killed. His name was Brigadier Nofriansya Yosua Huta Barat, known as Brigadier J. The first official story was simple. They said there had been a shootout between police aides. They said Brigadier J had threatened the general's wife, and that another aide had fired in defense. It was self-defense, they said. Case closed. But nothing about the story felt right. The timeline shifted. Witnesses contradicted each other. And the general's wife, Putri Chandrawati, seemed calm, too calm, for someone who had just survived a gun battle inside her home. The public demanded answers. Journalists began to dig. And the truth, once hidden behind walls of rank and authority, began to surface. Phone records showed that the so-called shootout never happened. There was no exchange of bullets, only execution. Brigadier J had been beaten, tortured, and shot at close range. Security cameras in the area had been mysteriously wiped clean, and all the evidence pointed back to one man, Ferdy Sambo himself. The revelation sent shockwaves through Indonesia. For years, Sambo had built his empire on loyalty and fear. He controlled investigations, silenced scandals, and rewarded those who obeyed. He was the man everyone saluted. Now, he was the man everyone feared to name. But evidence does not respect rank. When the president himself demanded transparency, the police could no longer protect their own. Investigators reopened the case, searching the Sambo home room by room. There they found the truth written in blood. Brigadier J's body told a story of pain, multiple gunshots, bruises, broken bones. This was not a shootout. It was an execution. And the orders had come from above. Witnesses later testified that Sambo had discovered messages between his wife and Brigadier J that made him furious. He accused the aide of dishonoring his family. Whether jealousy, pride, or rage drove him, no one can say for certain. But what is certain is that Sambo ordered his men to kill. He staged the scene, planted evidence, and fabricated reports. He used his power not to serve justice, but to rewrite it. For weeks, the truth was buried under layers of lies. But eventually, even a general cannot outmaneuver the truth. In August of 2022, Ferdy Sambo was arrested. The image of his arrest, a man once above the law, now handcuffed and expressionless, became a national symbol. During the trial, he stood beside his wife and the officers who had obeyed his order. Each of them faced the camera, their faces blank, their futures gone. Prosecutors described the murder as a betrayal of everything the badge stood for. They called Sambo a man who believed himself untouchable, who used his position to manipulate evidence, threaten witnesses, and mislead his entire department. The courtroom was packed every day. Television networks broadcast every word. It was not just a trial, it was a reckoning. When the verdict came on February 14th, 2023, the silence was absolute. Guilty. The general was sentenced to death. His wife received 20 years in prison. Other officers involved received lesser sentences, though many later appealed. Months later, Sambo's sentence was reduced to life imprisonment, but his name would forever remain synonymous with corruption and power, abused beyond imagination. Inside prison, Ferdy Sambo lives like a ghost. He no longer commands, no longer controls, no longer speaks. He eats alone, cut off from the empire he built through fear. The same walls he once used to protect himself now confine him. His downfall changed more than his own life. It forced Indonesia to look in the mirror, to see how far power could go when no one dared to question it. For years, citizens whispered about police corruption. Now they had proof. A general had murdered his own aide and nearly escaped justice. The case became a lesson carved into the nation's consciousness. That power unchecked becomes poison. that justice delayed becomes denial, and that even the highest rank cannot protect a man from the truth. In the end, Ferdy Sambo proved one thing: that evil does not always come from the shadows. Sometimes it comes from the top. Across continents and decades, from Russia to Indonesia, these stories share a single truth: the badge is only as good as the heart behind it. Each of these officers swore to protect, and each of them used that oath as a weapon. They remind us that justice is not a uniform. It is a choice that must be made again every day, by every hand that carries power. 10 names, 10 warnings, 10 reminders that when power becomes the crime, no one is safe, because evil does not always hide in darkness. Sometimes it wears a badge, smiles for the camera, and calls itself justice. Thank you for watching. If you want to see more stories that explore the shadows of true crime and human nature, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us which of these stories shocked you the most, because the next story might be closer than you think.